let me first introduce the topic and then I'm going to introduce the two speakers. So the topic for this week is on usage-based pricing. As you know, that classically SaaS has been all about that you charge some things. There is this notion of MRR, ACVs, where whatever you charge on a monthly basis, you multiply that by 12. That's what you charge on an annualized basis. It's a very fixed and predictable cash flow that you get. However, for many companies, and particularly you would have heard of examples like Twilio and others, and I'm sorry, Shipku, I should have said Exotel and others, but these are classically usage-based companies. And therefore, when you do get a customer, you don't have a fixed monthly that you charge that customer. It is usage-based. You often end up billing monthly, quarterly, whatever. And that has many different implications on the kind of decisions you take or how you build the company. And the purpose of today's session is to think about when should you do it, when should you not do it, and also how to do it and what to watch out for. And with that, let me introduce the two speakers. I'll begin with Shipku here. Shipku, I think I have known now ever since I've been in the venture business, which is now 9 years. I think Shipku and his colleagues, they started Exotel back in 2011-12 is what my broad recollection is. I guess the easiest way for me to think about Exotel is that it is essentially India's version of a Twilio. When you do have communication between multiple people, how do you create these communication APIs within your applications? And lots of articles have been written on Shipku and on Exotel in the last week, month. So I'm sure many of you are very familiar with what Exotel does and who Shipku is. But the one thing I would like to highlight about Shipku is that I think I've had the fortune of watching Exotel journey from the sidelines now for a long time. Clearly, we are all privy to the good times that the company has gone through, but I've also seen the amount of perseverance that Shipku has shown in building Exotel, particularly when the chips were down. And I've recently read some articles, blogs saying that, look, after the initial funding, nobody wanted to fund Exotel for a long time. I am also amongst those large number of investors who met Shipku many times, could not build the conviction, did that mistake. It is yet another one of my anti-portfolio, but kudos Shipku to what you have built. Also want to introduce Arpit Ratan, just to remove the confusion between Arpit Maheshwari and Arpit Ratan here. Arpit is the co-founder of Signzy. Some of you might have seen him in another session that we had in the past as well. Arpit and two other co-founders started Signzy, which is essentially trying to automate many of the difficult processes on the backend side of banks with use of AI. They started with the customer onboarding as their core product, have expanded into other products as well, have gone from India to Middle East to US, and their model is, or at least was, primarily usage-centric. And during the discussion today, I think we'll figure out some flavors of that as well. And I've built a pretty sizable company from India, classically targeted towards very large customers. So with that introduction, the first 8 to 10 minutes are reserved for Arpit Maheshwari and myself to dominate the questions. Thereafter, anybody is welcome to jump in. You can put your questions on the Q&A panel. And one request we'll make is, please only put questions which are relevant to the topic. If there are other questions that you have, you can send them to us separately. That can become topics for the next SaaS Talks as well. So maybe Arpit Maheshwari, I'm going to pass on to you to start shooting your questions first.
Thanks, Alok. And first, thanks Shipku and Arpit for taking out the time. Maybe I'll start with one question for both of you. And maybe Shipku, you can go first and Arpit, you can follow after that. Which is, see, if one takes a step back, you could argue that there is usage underlying all software, and therefore all software could be priced in a usage-based fashion. But I'm assuming that that does not mean all software should be priced in a usage-based fashion. So how did you guys decide that, look, the pricing model for Exotel or for Signzy had to be, usage-based pricing as opposed to more traditional sort of recurring SaaS pricing that we have seen in the past?
So now Exotel is a slightly different beast compared to what it was a couple of years ago. So we have the platform business which is an API using which one could embed voice and messaging into their applications. So that mostly follows usage-based pricing, transaction pricing. We also now have a contact center business. We always had a smaller part of the contact center business. Now we also have Amio. So we also have seats-based pricing, subscription pricing in that business. And then we also have Cogno, which is a conversational AI platform. So we also have conversation-based pricing as well as seat-based pricing there. So there's a bit of both SaaS and, okay, let me not say SaaS, I guess. There's a bit of subscription as well as usage pricing now in our business. And so I'm kind of seeing both sides on the same Excel sheet now. On the CPaaS side, CPaaS stands for Communication Platform as a Service. On the platform side, it was just very simple because the idea was telco plus plus, at least back in the days when we started. So people were paying for per minute and per SMS even before. So we simply just said, don't bother with the wires. We'll put it all on the cloud. So I think it was a natural extension of that. And so it was actually a no-brainer. What, however, we did was we also did not go for committed revenues at all, which is slightly different from Twilio and actually very different from all telcos. So they always go in with a minimum of X rupees per month committed. And then if your volume is below that, you still get charged 30,000 rupees a month. Whereas if it's more, then you basically pay only for that much amount. So we actually also did not do that. And that was mostly to put a brave front in front of our customers that we trust that you will continue to use our system, and we will use that as a way to showcase that we are here to not bind you into anything and you're free to switch to whomever you want at any point in time. So it was more of a philosophy or a sales pitch, if you will. So, and even today we actually don't have, I don't know, maybe we have 1 or 2 contracts where there is some committed revenues. But that's how it all got started.
Got it. And Arpit, what about Signzy?
Yeah, I think I also agree with this viewpoint which you started with, right? All softwares eventually underlying have a usage. And I think what we are really trying to differentiate is like an email is a subscription and there is a user we are saying more users means more usage of the software. But I think what we are fundamentally also talking about is that a transaction based, and which I think Shipku correctly mentioned, is that not only I'm talking about a subscription, which is also basis on usage or a user, but actually transactions, which is that irrespective of the number of users, irrespective of certain defined subscription matrix, just the amount of usage of the platform or the number of transactions that are going through the platform will start being built. And very similar to what Shivku said, I think that was not a business model we decided to start with, honestly. As a business, you'll always want defined committed revenues, nothing better than that. But it so happened that our customer was used to paying or budgeting basis the transactions. For in our case, that transaction is number of the customers which are getting onboarded. So traditionally, if a bank or financial institution is onboarding a customer, they have a budget on per customer onboarded, and their whole business metric is defined by that. So eventually the best way then to price would be if you can say that a part of this entire budget that you have to onboard a customer, just give me a part of this. And therefore, in our case, the transaction metering became the number of customer or the customer onboarded, and can be different from different business. But I think eventually will depend is how is that budget split within the client, and maybe different for different kind of software business, I presume.
And is one way, therefore, of paraphrasing, I think both what Shivku and Arpit, you guys are saying is the market norms are already established as such. In Exotel's case, how telcos had been pricing, and in your case, how customers had been sort of assigning a line item in their budget for what we were offering. That it just made the most sense to go ahead with a usage-based pricing.
Absolutely.
Got it. Shipku, one specific question for you, since you mentioned that now you have, multiple products with different kinds of pricing models, right? There is subscription, there is usage, and then there is also hybrid subscription plus usage. Any lessons or do's and don'ts on how to keep different pricing, like how do these models coexist within the same company?
So I think, I don't think it is necessary for us to simplify pricing simply because it's better to put it in an Excel sheet. That can't be, or at least that's not my objective. I think we need to tie it to what makes most sense for the users. And I do anticipate that some sections of our business units will price differently even going forward. And I'm happy to keep it that way. However, having said that, currently I am actually planning on subsidizing or folding some of the moving pieces, reducing the number of moving pieces, especially where some other simpler pricing model is available. So in the case of contact center, for example, people understand seat-based pricing. So I am thinking of maybe knocking off all the minute-based pricing and SMS-based pricing, WhatsApp API-based pricing, etc., and then fold it all into $40 per seat per month. You can call or talk to whomever, how much ever you want. And I think a bit of that is also being championed by Jio, and we know that that seems to have really kind of it's taken off, right? So that's one experiment I'm looking forward to doing, and so far it seems all right. That I think people are kind of willing to look at it. Especially when you go very large, people tend to want to go to the nitty-gritties of pricing. So they want, why don't you give it like this? Why don't you give it like that? And can I now pay you on per channel? So sometimes even customers come and ask us for their own pricing models, and sometimes we oblige even for that, especially if the deal is very large. So I'm also kind of open for that as well.
Got it. I can see a lot of people have already put questions on the Q&A panel, and I think Sachin from so why don't we get Sachin Arora on the panel, because he has a question that he wants to ask.
I'm just putting him on there.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sachin.
Sachin, are you there?
Hey, thanks, Alok. Thanks, Arpit. I'm glad to see Alok after a long time. I don't really have a question, but I have a point of view. I think pricing is an extremely important tool in the hand of a founder to really get a product sort of getting adopted, right? And I see that I've worked, for example, in my previous job at Amazon AWS, that they could really break through the traditional IT that has been built over decades. Not just by the beautiful tool called cloud in the background, but also a lot through pricing, right? And pricing has this beautiful thing that if you break the barriers down of adoption and make the guy who is perhaps not one of your advocate of your product to try it out in the first place, because the entry barrier is so less, makes it very, very important. So that's a pricing mechanism that one can use. But suddenly this mechanism starts to look very ugly when the adoption goes very big, because then the pay-per-use model becomes very expensive. So and traditionally we have a mindset of this or that, not necessarily moving between from here to there. And that's where I think a lot of innovation must happen in the financial engineering, which I still see not happening at the pace we are churning out products. That it's a good way to bring in new customers at a lower cost, and at the unit of the cost becoming less, so that they can adopt your product. But when they are at the peak and throttle of usage of the product, how do you really maintain that? Because that time this price would have gone really up, and then they're looking for more committed pricing and not paying more than a certain limit. and becomes completely different user. So do you really think this is a life cycle of the user, and pricing a mechanism to really take customer from left side of the things to the right side of the things?
Actually, very interesting comment. Would be good to hear either Arpit, Shivku comment on this one.
So maybe I'll go first on this. So in our case, at least the metric that we chose was something which determined success of adoption also. So for example, for a bank, the number of customers that get onboarded will determine the success of that business. So the way we also pitched is saying that we are partnering in your success, and eventually, if the number grows, we win. If the number doesn't grow, either of both of us lose. So capping that amount, saying that this is the cap or this is the minimum commitment, is actually a negative incentive for us from that from their perspective. So the way we do convincing is saying that let us get partnered in your success metric. In our case, that success metric is onboarding. In some other case, it can be something else. But if you're part of the success metric, then it becomes more like a partner revenue versus saying that I want to size you like an IT vendor, because eventually, and that is why our budgets actually come from business and they don't come from IT. So slightly different view on this, but I do understand, and that comes very often, that at a high volume a large bank would want to push and say that we want to maintain our budgets. That always comes, but uh, at least in our case it's till now been slightly contained, is because we try to put it on the success metric. But one thing does happen is that at a very high volume they will come and negotiate that per transaction value. So they will say that while we are not budgeting, because it then defeats the whole incentive structure, but they will come back and say, and that's, I think, kind of the how the business is.
Shivku, any thoughts on this as well? Because you have some massive customers as well. So
not much more, except that around about 1 crore a month for us is where it kind of plateaus. So we've never really seen companies be comfortable with paying more than 1 crore a month. I don't know what that number is, but or why that number is, but and then usually, no matter how you twist around pricing, there's always a vendor guy who comes and sits and says, "Now what?" So I just wanted to add that.
in which case, let me ask a follow-up question to the question that Sachin asked. Therefore, that is the real intent of usage-based pricing indeed to lower the barrier for customers to try you, but ultimately it will have to move to sort of a more predictable model of charging. Though actually, Arpit, I know you argued against it already as well, because customers have a budget in mind. Look, beyond this, I can't spend on something. Or is there a framework when you will choose one versus the other?
Sorry, is that to me?
Either of you.
Arpit, why don't you go?
So we actually do both. We do both subscription and usage pricing. Actually, today, the way our product works is that there is a platform, and then there are underlying services for which there is transaction fee. So our platform is absolutely right. Will get plateaued at a point of time. At beyond a point, the customer will say that this is maximum I'll pay for platform, whether I have 100 users or I have 1,000 users. I'm going to end up paying you X. But for the other part, which is in our product, which is underlying services, which is like KYC services, it is like e-signs, it's like Aadhaar checks. We do not see that ever being capped. Yes, people will negotiate on the pricing on higher volumes, and largely because this is a transaction check, which is to be done by them also if they were to, let's say, use someone else, or they were to eventually do it themselves. And because the nature of the industry is such that this is going to be done in the same way across, they would rather pay you also on transaction based and not get into the whole point of that. The other point is maybe in our case, because it comes from a business budget, where the budget is basis the number of people onboarded, they're budgeting it. So maybe that is a very big change as well.
No, I just to add to that, I also agree that so long as your pricing vector is in alignment with the primary KPI of the team that you're selling into, then you can. I think that's the best way to kind of align, I think. So anything else is just difficult for them to understand why you're pricing, how much you're pricing, and how they are going to benefit from it. And so I agree with that.
So I'm going to push back on that statement a little bit. And sorry, I'm harping on this because I think deciding between these two models of pricing is such a critical decision. So and I'm going to take a very random example. Let's take a learning management system, right? They've been around for 25 years. You could argue that the learning and development department will have a KPI that will talk about the number of courses or average number of courses that have been taken by every individual. However, LMS software will never be priced on a per course taken or number of minutes of courses taken. That never happens in that situation. Whereas if you're talking of a postman, that might be usage-based pricing. Or I guess Twilio and you, Exotel and Signzy, these are great examples. So is there, I guess where I'm going is that, is there a benefit of going for a classical SaaS pricing as well, assuming your customer did not have this constraint or were not to put this hard constraint on you, that's not how I measure value? Because actually I could argue that usage-based pricing otherwise should be done in every situation.
So Alok, what I feel, no, there's slight difference here. Now, in case of learning, let's say a learning software, number of courses does not determine the success of that outcome.
Right.
Outcome is that did you, let's say, get 99 marks in exam. Now, let's say if you could meter and charge on the marks that the kid was getting in the exam, then I would argue that in that case, you would never cap it.
Got it.
Because the final outcome is then deterministic. In case of like same for a lead management system or a typical CRM, it is on the adoption of the salesperson, not the number of leads. Because the number of leads is not deterministic of the final outcome.
Got it.
So I think there are many factors that determine pricing, Alok. So I think one, of course, is our desire to tie our fortunes with the customer's fortunes, which I think makes it a little bit easy for the customer.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, from our standpoint, it will be nice to have committed annual revenues paid upfront. That will be nice so that the predictability of the business increases, but that may not necessarily work for the customer. So I think, and then there are and then there are some macro trends that are also happening in the environment. So WhatsApp's now come up with conversational pricing, which is one piece of conversation for 24 hours is charged at, I think, 49 paisa or something like that. So now they are going in that direction. Now I think if there will be a lot of other, I am also now talking to my folks and then saying, hey, now can we also create conversational pricing, right? So that seems to be the vogue. That seems to be the trend right now. So I think there are a few factors that kind of have to come together to be able to come up with the right pricing. I would even argue that pricing is also quite dynamic. So although LMS systems may be charging for number of employees now, which is what I think you're trying to indicate. I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow somebody comes up with this new pricing and then it kind of takes off and suddenly everybody in the LMS environment now follows this as well. So that's possible too. But I think ultimately, to me, the question is between usage and subscription pricing, predictability is the key differentiation. I think SaaS pricing is a bit more predictable compared to transaction pricing. And so consequently, a dollar, I think investors will be interested in paying more for a dollar of revenue in a predictable subscription-based business compared to a usage-based business. However, because usage-based businesses tend to align themselves more with the growth vectors of the company, I think that their ability to grow into larger invoice sizes become better. So although predictability becomes a bit lower, I think growth can be faster.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I just have one more.
Oops, sorry, my bad.
What happened?
No, yeah, I pressed the wrong button and I lost him. I'm going to bring him back in. Just give me a second. In the meantime, Sapan, why don't you introduce yourself and your question?
Hi, so this is Sapanya from Easy Rewards. We just had a word yesterday and I caught you today. So I am from Easy Rewards. We run a CRM company since the last 10 years, and similar conversation, and that's the reason I just joined in. So Shipu, when you manage the WhatsApp, how do you manage so much of pricing changes? Like WhatsApp again in February is going to change the price, and there is a huge change in that price. So what is the engagement with the customer, and how do you all roll back, or you all take some loss, or what's the market scenario in this senses when there is so much of fluctuation in pricing every 6 months in that sense?
Yeah, actually, WhatsApp being WhatsApp, they can pull off all these things. So as of now, we are really just passing the blame to WhatsApp and then the buck back to the customer. So we are basically saying, look, this is what WhatsApp is saying, so that's what we are all going to do, and that's what you need. I think mostly everybody is doing.
Okay, got it.
And sorry, Sachin, I pressed the wrong button. If you can repeat your question.
No problem. I was just trying to come up with some sort of a framework, obviously at a very high level. I think there are various dimensions to the usage-based pricing as a excitement to sort of getting things adopted in the first place. So I think one is the novelty of the product that itself, like LMS has been there for a long time versus any new sort of innovation which has not been tried and sort of fresh to be tested by clients is one way to really bring down the barriers of adoption. So where usage-based pricing can come handy, but the minute it reaches a threshold of peak adoption, then people would look at some stability in pricing. So that's one dimension. The second dimension, which I think we haven't debated here, could be a risk that this product is sharing it with the company using it. Like for example, there are various SaaS providers who work together with the companies where there is a certain bit of unless it's like a pure software which has been sold, if there is any sharing of the risk of what the product would end up delivering, could also give a long-term adoption of usage-based pricing, even though it hits the peak adoption. If there is absolutely no risk, it's just bytes and bits given, and I have no relationship how clients are using it, it's fine, right? You beyond a point, you can just throttle it out because it's end of the day software revenues, right? But if there is a piece where there is some risk that the SaaS company can position to take, and I don't know how to put it in words with example at the moment, there is a possibility that you continue to drive up the usage and then and then continue to sort of, wrong to say, but milk the customer for longer.
Sachin, while I do have some comments on that, but I think in the interest of accommodating there are lots of questions on the Q&A panel. Arpit, why don't you go ahead and pick someone?
Sure.
So I have a question which I think I'm forgetting exactly where it was, but one around go-to-market. See, which is when you are, how do you think about quotas? How do you think about incentive compensation for traditional pricing versus user-based pricing models? And any of you guys, please do feel free to take this up. Either Shipu or
I would love to understand if someone has solved this, right? I mean, I would love to hear from them honestly, and we have experimented with like a lot of them, and I won't say we have succeeded till now. So I can at least just mention our experiments, but I would love to hear from someone who has really cried it. And I'll tell you the problem is because eventually in sales you want predictability, which means that your investors will always say that what and nothing against the investors on this call, but they would deploy your funds. But the thing with usage is you don't have that predictability. And therefore, you may have a good month, the next month maybe, and so suddenly you may say that, oh wow, I grew 20% this month, but suddenly that next month that entire 20% may come down. So there is no upward curve the way it may be in a subscription-based pricing, because if you're working with a decent sized company, they're going to continuously adopt you and increase users and therefore increase usage. That's not true about usage-based pricing. It may be very big in like a December, in a November month of Diwali and come down the next month. And that is why the big problem is how do you incentivize your sales? Because you can't give them a actual quota because even you don't know. So we initially tried and coming out with the number value quota, but today what we are preferring more is that we give them a number of deals. So historically, we now know the average deal size for a particular type of customer, and what we just do is we kind of just multiply that math by that average size to come at the value for our board and our other predictions. But to the person, we just give them a number quota, as in do 10 deals this quarter, for example, in categories. So we've divided in large, mid, strategic accounts. So we just say that, this your 10 would consume 8 small, 2 medium, something like that.
And Arpit, I have a follow-up question to that one, but before that, would love to hear Shivku's views also.
We also tried different things, and it's still evolving even as we speak. But I think mostly we take about 12 months of LTV. 12 months of, in our case, margins is not close to 100%. So it's more like 50-60%. So gross margin into 12 months. And then we basically give an incentive on that. I think that's one model that's there right now. But I agree with Arpit. I think it's kind of all over the place. So I think only time will tell how it kind of plays out. But this is what we do today.
Got it. Actually, the follow-up question that I had was just exactly around what Shivku you mentioned, that how do you calculate the base for incentive payouts and so on. So at least that I think has been answered. Hey, Nikhil, why don't you go ahead?
Hey, thank you, Arpit. Thank you, Alok, for having me. Thanks a lot, our panelists. My question is about the geographical pricing. Should pricing in every country be different? And usually at what stage would you like that to happen? Like when should we implement it? Is something that we are trying to figure out.
So Nikhil, before anyone answers this, I really want to know how did you do what you're doing?
Yeah, actually,
I really
so impressive.
I would really want to do this for my sales meeting. So if you can please tell me how you're doing this.
Sure. So right. So I'll quickly explain. This is TrimPixel. I'm live on this Zoom call via TrimPixel. I'm co-founder of TrimPixel. TrimPixel actually allows you to sort of appear in this manner and much more impressive ways. If I can quickly just show around, what it allows me to do is just place myself anywhere on the slide and just play around with it on a live call. So this is what it does. And the content that can be playing in the background, basically I can share content across file formats and across devices. So the plethora of complexity that I can explain, it becomes very simpler because it totally gives you even better than an in-person experience.
Wow.
So by the way, Nikhil, you have found yourself about 100 customers on this call, but back to Arpit Ratan.
Thanks a lot, Alok. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
No, I was not answering it. I was just really asking him, because I was super impressed. But, because we work in some markets, at least to your first question, I think, of course, it should be priced differently. No doubts about it. And ideally, if you have to price it, you want to be a dollar pricing all markets, but that's not how it works. Very different from software in this way, actually. Software, you can still have a dollar pricing which works across geographies. But transaction pricing, the big difference, for example, a large bank in India for us would give us, let's say, would have a volume of 2 lakh a month. A large bank in Middle East will have a volume of 2,000 a month. So of course you can't have the same pricing for them, right? It just doesn't, the input cost doesn't justify it. So because of that, I think, and I'm sure, will be similar for others also, but more to Shivku. But at least in our business, it has to be different in geographies because of the transaction volumes.
Right from day one.
Yeah, absolutely right from day one.
Got it.
It's not like a premium thing. It's not like I'm premiuming out because it's US or not. It's just that the way that business works, because the transactions are less, I can't be giving the same price I'll give to a bank at a 2 lakh volume a month.
Understood.
So in my business, the largest competitor is Twilio, and they spend about 50% of their top line on sales and marketing. And we spend about 10%. Although I think we should be spending a lot more than what we are. The cost structures are different in the US is what I'm trying to bring about here. So consequently, your pricing should be different for every country. It cannot be the same because the cost structures are different. Sometimes for us, it's also a cost plus, at least in our business. So, depending on the input cost from telcos, obviously, that is also different in different countries. So consequently, that will be different for us as well. So, and then the last one, of course, is who else is competition and what are they selling at? So naturally, the PPP of the purchasing power of all of your customers are different in different places. So you should, you don't want to price it in a manner that comes across either as too costly or too cheap in front of your companies, right? So some of the market factors also matter.
Thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Arpit.
Correct. Look up, you want to go ahead next? Or whether?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. So Langvify is an upcoming SaaS platform. We are just starting out, but we have really good pipeline and people are calling us almost daily to get our APIs integrated in their ecosystem. So we have a really good point to start with. My caution to you is how should we set our pricing discovery from the set point? Right now, we just charge them lump sum amount of 5,000 per month as a trial part of a 3 months pilot program, so that we don't have to build the backend to track and all those model. We can just focus on the PMF. So how do I start pricing it accurately from customer point of view? Pay per use and a per user basis both make sense. So which one do I choose first, and how do I evolve from here?
I mean, on the pay per use versus pay per user, as Arpit was also indicating, and I don't think Alok was completely agreeing to that point, I would say that you should try to understand what is the KPI of the business unit that you are trying to sell into based on what your product is, and then if it is user, it is user. If it is transaction, then it is. I think that's the easiest way. At least in my opinion, you should choose between one or two. But hey, I think pricing discovery is a complicated topic. I don't think anybody here can give sweeping suggestions on what you should do. A/B testing, I would argue, would be the best way to go about it. So you should pick a few vectors, experiment, and see what kind of works out best. And the last point is how much. I think that's also another question that you asked. It'll depend a little bit on what level you're selling at and what their budgets are. So that's also another way to think about pricing discovery. So if let's say the decision maker has authority to spend classic example, right? $25,000 a year on his credit card, then you want to keep it below $25,000 and not above, because then you'll have to go through some other process and things like that.
I think one other suggestion lookup I have for you is that even when I'm assuming, because you use the word that you have an API, if it's an API which is targeted towards a developer, and I'm in my mind differentiating between an API versus an SDK. If it's an SDK, then I think of it as an embedded product. If it is an API, then it's basically a call from their software to your software. Usually most developers in case of APIs will have a user-based pricing. A call-based. So every API call, or sometimes packs of API call, you can say for X number of calls, this is the price. For these many number of calls, this is the price. If it's an SDK oriented kind of a sale, then actually you go for an annual pricing, which is more classical SaaS based. At least that's the norm that I've seen. And again, I do want to re-emphasize what Shipko also said. Pricing is a continuous discovery, by the way. I don't think you'll be ever done with it. Not only which big model, but then what's the basis for pricing, even within that, what's the value to keep at, and then you get into enterprise kind of pricing, which might be very different. So it's going to be a continuous experimentation with pricing as long as you're running the company.
I understand. Thank you for both of your inputs.
Sorry, I have a question.
Sure.
Who decides pricing in some of your companies?
Right. So typically the CEOs of those edutech or content-based.
Sorry, that was not to. I mean, you can also answer it. That was to Arpit and also maybe to Alok and to Arpit as well. So in an organization, who is the owner of pricing? Who decides pricing?
So Shivku, it's a good question and something which actually I find that there isn't as much science around it. But usually, at least, there are two broad stakeholders between whom I think pricing gets decided. One is actually on the product side. So I think the product owner is a very key person who, in some senses, decides both what the model should be and then what the price should be. In fact, if I disaggregate your problem into the model versus the number, I have seen model usually comes from the product side and the number usually comes from the sales side eventually. Because sales is the best barometer to understand sort of where does a threshold lie, where you can maximize the revenue and sort of lower the friction in the sales process. But the model itself, usually, at least I have seen product to be the decision maker on that front. In early stage companies, though, as you can imagine, this is not an individual per se. Founders collectively end up making these calls because they are so strategic that these things actually bubble all the way to the top. But Arpit, maybe would love to know how you guys have done this thing.
No, exactly what you said. So I think initially, if you will just get into the room, and if now I look back, I think it was sales strategy, which was not really the sales, but sales strategy and product who were together making most of the decisions. But because there was actually a lot of problem over pricing, to be very honest, because of this two people trying to make a decision, we eventually decided that let the product choose. And product, once they were mature, they had enough market research within themselves to discover pricing from the market. So eventually we came out with that because what was happening is that we will decide a pricing, and because sales has a say, every time they go out in a quarter, you don't make a sale, you come back saying that pricing is wrong and let's do this discussion again. So we said that this can't keep going on. That cannot be one of those open discussions, right? So eventually we said let the product decide the pricing, and that way we at least found more stability in pricing. But Shivku, I exactly get where the question is coming from. It's been one of those hot topics in the company.
Correct. Akhil, you want to go ahead next?
Yeah, thank you guys. Lovely panelist. Shivku, congrats on raising the fund. My question is around scaling the pricing. So I'll basically give you a rough idea on what I'm trying to say. So I am a co-founder of a company called Taste. We are based in Frankfurt and we have an IoT platform. And previously we were doing usage-based pricing. So based on how much data points, analytics, and digital twin you create on the asset, we will charge you. But what we have currently seen is most of our competitors are able to charge in millions, where we are still charging in the range of every month 15,000 to 20,000 euros. So the scaling for us is not, or I would say like I don't see a way on how I can scale to the competitors because our VCs are not happy. Because most of our competitors are working with Fortune 500 companies. We are working with Fortune 100 companies. And I think the battle we are winning is mostly based on pricing, though we are adding a lot more value to them. So either downside protection, where we are able to maximize their asset lifecycle, or upside maximization, where we are able to make them more revenue. In both the ways, we are winning, but we are not able to scale it. So my question is, how can I take my pricing from 150K to 250K to $1 million by removing the usage? Because if I stick with the usage, it's never going to happen.
And Akhil, just one question I have on that, and is that today, what is that usage that you're charging for? What is that transaction?
So it varies depending on three different tier. So tier 1 is digital twin. So how many assets you put into the platform. So each asset would cost you a certain amount. How many analytics? There are pre-built analytics already supplied by us. So how many pre-built analytics you use? And the third one is how many data connectors you are going to use to connect the data to the platform.
Yeah, so at least the way I look at it, it doesn't need to be usage based. I mean, you can pretty much, if it suits you, you can definitely move to a subscription and have a package saying that X number of data packets and 10 X subscriptions, and you can pretty much build a whole subscription package. I don't see there being a necessity of usage linked.
Yeah, I'll I'll tell you, I already tried it for the last 7 months with at least 12 clients, and none of them were happy with the pricing. So I wasn't able to back it up. So if I go to, let's say, the biggest automotive manufacturer in Germany, and I tell them it's going to cost you annually, the ARR would be roughly around 6 to 7 million, and you are making this amount out of it. So compared to the asset value, we were only charging 7% of the whole asset value. But still, they weren't happy with it, and they were like, give us an understanding why it's going to cost us this much. And then the best I can do technically, because those guys are also smart, is bring up to 1.5 to 2 million. So my real struggle is, how are people in the world doing this and able to back it up?
Yeah, Akhil, let me, if I may chime in here. Sorry, Shipku, you were saying something. Please go ahead.
No, I wasn't. Please go ahead.
Akhil, I think let's separate your question into two parts. Whether what should be the model for pricing, which is whether it should be usage based, or whether through some underlying metrics you figure out a more predictable pricing on an annualized basis or a monthly basis for the customer. And I agree with what Arpit Ratan said, that in your case, just because you're using analytics so many times a day or whatever doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to derive more value, less value. That connection to the outcome actually is not as easy. And therefore, you would rather go for a lump sum pricing, even though there will be basis to that pricing still. The second question you're asking is that how do I justify high pricing itself? And you are putting a price of 6 to 7 million, but your customer is pushing you down to 1.5 million, or your competition is able to get a larger price, but you are not able to get more than 15,000 euros a month, etc. That's actually a slightly more complex and a different question, which is more going to be around how you run the entire sales cycle as well. And it has too many parameters, frankly, to be able to cover in this call, but it depends on who in the hierarchy in the organization of your customer are you going to. At what scale or granularity are you understanding the problem and pitching for the problem? Are you able to actually show the value or not? And if you do, I mean, how do you basically weave in the value in your sales cycle to be able to justify that pricing as well? Because I have seen the same product being sold for very little and also very high, but it also depends on how you are selling. So it's more a how to sell question. And I don't think it is just a pricing question in my mind.
Understood, Alok. Okay, I'm going to take that.
I just have one more point to add. I think brand also plays a role, or how you position the brand also plays a role in how you are able to price. Nobody really flinches to pay 1.3, 1.4 lakhs for an iPhone, but OnePlus will never be able to pull that off. So I know it's a cliche, but if you come across as a brand that is affordable, then I don't think you can compete with brands that come across as premium.
Understood. Got it. So that's more of a digital marketing play where we spend some money over there and build more brand awareness.
Again, it may not be just a digital marketing thing. Sometimes remember that software is a very fuzzy product, and it's very difficult to understand the value and the risk of deploying a software. Usually, it's not necessarily what you see is sort of what you get. And therefore, it also depends on the kinds of customer references you have, how long you have been in the ecosystem. Like there was a saying that you never get fired for hiring IBM, like at one point. And therefore, if you're hiring IBM, paying them $10 million, people are okay with it, but other people you will not. But so some of these brands also take time to build as well, and that's a stepwise process also.
And on that, I just want advice, Akhil, because we used it, is start to work with people who already have brand, and maybe try and enter, because you are talking about very, very large deals. So maybe better off, and there's enough on the pie for, I think, even a large SI and consultant. So maybe well put off if you can get a McKinsey to pitch you or a BCG to pitch you or things like that.
Understood. Perfect. Thanks a lot, guys. Very helpful.
Two more points. One is, you could also think of things like Gartner and those kinds of things. I think that will also add to a lot of credibility. I don't know if you'll be able to pull that off. That's one. And second thing that just came to my mind was somebody told me that Salesforce contracts actually have I think 10% cost escalation every year baked into the contract. Just believe that. Right? It's just like, we are talking about, worried about how we are going to go and, customers are going to come and squeeze us, and they actually have 10% escalation baked into the contract every year.
Very interesting.
But
And-
also like the difference there is like Salesforce has a really strong SLA. So even for like really high escalation issue that you might have, they respond in less than 4 minutes with a resolution. Within 4 hours with the resolution. So I work for Salesforce, and that 10% mostly not just goes for the platform, but it goes for the customer support and the SLA they offer with it.
Okay.
And
Akhil, if you're okay, we're going to move away. Akhil, if you're okay, we're going to move away from the Salesforce topic.
Yes.
In the interest of time.
Yeah, we will.
We have Nupur who has
Thank
joined
you,
Nupur who has joined the screen as well.
No, sorry. Nupur messaged me separately. I think she got added by mistake, but she can still, she can still stick around as a panelist. But if we can pick another question from the Q&A panel, we still have so many questions. One thing which is around, how do you think of the role of customer success? Because, we want users to go up, and how do we structure that team? Perhaps, I think that has come up from a couple of people. Would love to get your thoughts on that one.
That's also a very interesting topic. So there seems to be broadly two kinds of models. One is customer success, customer support, kind of going into like a chief customer officer, separately reporting into the CEO. That seems to be one structure that I found in several companies. Mm-hmm. And the other one is customer success being a part of the growth organization. Sometimes customer success does account management, so upsell, cross-sell. So they also have quota. Sometimes they only do organic, whatever that organic, in the case of usage, let's say number of calls, number of messages, number of API hits. And then sometimes they don't have quota at all, and they only have retention as their targets. So usually it'll be a hit or miss between NRR, GRR, churn, revenue churn, logo churn, CSAT, NPS. So this is the broad spectrum around which customer success seems to operate.
And between these models for a usage-based pricing-driven company, do you have any preferences, or like maybe non-preferences also? That wake to the structure, and then what should customer success be? Sort of what should their KPIs be, and what should they not be?
I actually think that the best practices of the market needs to be fixed with the people that we are trying to deal with. So I think I actually look at the capabilities of the person whom we have at hand, and then also ask, is this person really motivated in, let's say, fixing CSAT? Or is this person really interested in hitting quota? So I think we need to sort of marry. I mean, of course, if you're starting from a clean slate, then you can write the ideal CS JD, and then you can go get a person like that. But otherwise, I think you'll have to marry some of these best practices with the people that you have and sort of improvise on it, I think.
Got it. Arpit, what do you think?
So actually, in our case, there is one more factor, which is actual product. So unlike a subscription where I take one software and I just grow adoption through customer success, in usage, actually, customers sometimes buy two software. So what they will do is that they will buy two SMS providers, or in our case, sometimes they use two KYC providers, and then they split usage. So actually, they also, because it's success-based, they monitor the success, which is the latency times, the actual success time. So in our case, what we started doing was, as a product, we realized that we need to give more visibility on our outcomes, which is either success, latency, and we realized it very late that apart from all the relationship management, which Shipko was absolutely right, you'll have to do, we'll have to give more visibility to the actual developers or product managers, whoever you want to call it, who are not relationship folks. They're really worried, am I using the best product? And sometimes it's not about are they using the best product, is it visible to them that they're using the best product? So we started doing that whole reporting weekly, sending them a chart. This is your usage, this is your success metric, this was your latency. So I think that in subscription, in the actual subscription SaaS may not be so relevant, but in a usage SaaS, that's I think in my view even more relevant than maybe the actual relationship management.
Got it.
I think we are running out of time, Arpit. We have We literally have, I think, literally a few seconds left before we hit 6 p.m. And we always promise that we'll start on time and we'll end on time. Apologies to a lot of folks who have put a lot of questions on the Q&A panel that we could not answer today. I know that
those are very interesting questions, I can tell you.
Yeah, those are very good questions. So thank you for that. But hopefully we'll see many of you soon enough in our 23rd edition. Until then, thank you so much. And thank you, Shipku, and thank you, Arpit. Really appreciate your coming.
No, thanks. It's fantastic.